of Acts. But I just named it today, again, as last time, Christ is risen, because I just want to point out how the resurrection of Christ is the absolute epicenter of Christianity, of the church, and especially of the authentic church that we believe, and it is the Orthodox Church. And if you come to a worship or divine liturgy of the Orthodox Church, you'll see that everything sort of flows out from this event of the resurrection of Christ. There is 11 accounts of the risen Christ appearing to his apostles and followers after his resurrection. And when you see, for example, Paul, and we're now in the book of Acts, we're following Paul on his missionary journeys. We are now about on his third missionary journey, because that's chapter 18. You will see that Paul, in some other places in his epistle, says, "Oh, by the way, Jesus appeared to 500 people, and you can go and talk to them." Pretty much, if you don't believe, this is what it is. This is what happens. And he will say also that if Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we are the most pitiful of all. How does he say that? What's the wording in English? That if Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we are the most miserable, or the most pitiful of all people. Because it means that we're pretty much worse than the atheists. Like, atheists don't believe in nothing, and they hope in nothing, and they expect nothing, and they live in such a way. Like, this is the end of the world. I'm going to live for another 10, 15, 55 years, doesn't really matter. So I better use this to enjoy this life. But then we Christians, if Christ did not rise from the dead, then all what we do is just in vain, just useless. We should lock up the churches. We, the priests, should find some better job, really, and the church should not exist, really. Because if he did not rise from the dead, and everything what we talk about is absolute rubbish and nonsense and makes no meaning, no sense, nothing. So that's why the church celebrates the resurrection of Christ traditionally for 40 days. And for 40 days, we sing this song, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and to those in tombs, bestowing life. That's the most short hymn song that's the most often repeated in the Orthodox worship. And in absolutely every service now, from Easter until Ascension Day, which is the 40th day after Easter. And because of Christ's resurrection, Paul, whom we are now following on his missionary journeys, is proclaiming Iesus Kyrios, which means Jesus is the Lord. Kyrios in Greek means the Lord. Iesus in Greek, Jesus. Because who was called the Lord before Jesus? Emperor, Roman Emperor was called Kyrios. He was the Lord. And that title, Kyrios, or the Lord, was reserved only for the Roman Emperor, no one else. So we see that there is this switch, and also this sort of a revolution in Christianity, where Paul sort of is picking on a painful spot for the Romans, like he's really touching where he shouldn't be touching, and provoking. His message is very provocative. So that's really sort of, just need to see, someone is in the waiting room, but I can't find it. Sorry. Are you recording this, Gregory? Already? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, good. So, what else we need to say about resurrection? There isn't enough books that are written that say about the resurrection of Christ. And I feel whatever I say is not enough. And that's why I think you need to sort of delve in and sort of surrender yourself in that mystery, because it is a mystery. You can't really say a cannibal. We've seen this man crucified on the cross. He died. We buried him. These women went to the tomb. They were carrying ointments and oils, perfumes, that went to body. On the third day, as it was custom, Jewish custom, died, and they found an empty tomb. Was there. Moreover, he appears to them, and he says, or the angel says, now, in the four Gospels, by the way, when we talk about resurrection, the four Gospels, there is a different account. There is a different description how it actually happened. In some Gospels, you'll see an angel saying, why are you looking the living one amongst the dead? It's not here, he's risen. Some will see, like in Mark, Jesus, like in Jesus himself, he is. Somewhere there's an angel. In Mark, there's a young man. It's not an angel, but the young man that was mentioned a few chapters before, who was naked and crazy outside of his mind, totally. Now, that same young man stands at the tip of Jesus, dressed white, and he's the witness of the risen Christ. Now, there is this confusion, all right, this is not unanimous. This isn't the same description. These are variations. Why is this a variation? Well, because it's a legend. And when you see one event, and all of us now, you can be witnesses of the same event that happened. And 20 years later, like when they start writing about this, you'll remember one thing, I'll remember the other thing, and she's going to remember the other thing. And we're going to... So this is actually the proof that it's true. Sorry? Also, you can say that, yeah. But it says it tells us, first of all, that it's true. And it's not made up like if someone was going there and revising these texts, why should mention this young man because he's crazy and everyone knows this crazy guy? Why would we should actually think this? This shouldn't be. Right? This is not supposed to be here. This is not a pleasant thing. Okay? So that's why it's not a myth and legend. Like if you read Greek myths and legends, Roman myths and legends, or any myths and legends in general, I was asking me about myths and legends. So if you read, and I love myths and legends, if you read any source of myths and legends in any culture, any civilization, you will see one thing, and that's glorifying their deities, their gods, their God, and presenting him for them as perfect. Okay? You see the reverse thing in Christianity in the Bible. You see Jesus mingling with sinners, tax collectors, with prostitutes, with the worst of words. You see the bad side of Jesus as well, the bad side. But the human side, him crucified on the cross saying, my Lord, my God, my God, say, my volumes and PhDs and doctor's theses were written just based on that sentence. But it's there to provoke us it's there because it's true. It's, and all these bits and pieces that you can see, God, there's something wrong.
What you're talking about the time when he was on the cross?
Yes.
When he said, Lord, forgive me, and that was his last word?
No.
No?
No.
Which part?
When he was on the cross in excruciating pain, and he was saying to God the Father, my God, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah. And that wasn't his last word. His last word was, you will be in heaven with me to the criminals on his, I can't remember which side, but I find it amazing that so many small words can be taken from what he said, and there can be such a big, controversy over such a small part of text out of the Bible. I've always found that amazing. And the fact that you can also take a small part of the words of Jesus and also make a huge change and bring people to the Lord as well. It's almost like Satan is trying to combat that, you know, like you can see preachers that expand on small verses, small words, and bring people to God, and then you can find people who can find small verses and turn people away as well. Isn't it like that? The two sides of the coin is that battle that we're in.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is also, it's not everywhere, like in all the four Gospels. Like somewhere, his last words are, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And then in John's Gospel, it's totally different. In John's Gospel, his last words are, it is finished.
What was it?
It is finished.
It is finished. Yeah. You could take those in context, couldn't you? You could think that he would say,
"Oh, there is
that one," and then he said the other one. So depends who's closer to him and who's listening. You know?
No. You have to take the whole word. For example, if we talk about John's Gospel is reflecting Book of Genesis. This is really important to know. The Book of Genesis starts with the words, "In the beginning, God made heaven, earth, and the earth," and so on. And John's Gospel starts with what words? In the beginning, there was words. So John's Gospel and Genesis, John is reflecting the Book of Genesis. And you'll see in many, many places there in John's Gospel the same thing, how he's actually, and that is why, and I'm saying this last year at some point, but I'm going to repeat this again.
Sure.
When you read the Book of Genesis and the very first chapter, where it says, where he describes making some. Just a second. So, chapter 1, verse 27 of the Book of Genesis, it says this. So God made human being. In the image of God, he made them. Male, in the image of God, he made him. Male and female, he made them. Okay?
Yeah.
So the image of God, human being is made in the image of God. Remember that. Human being is made in the image of God. Male and female, he made them. So there is something about male and female that's connected with the image of God. Okay?
Yeah.
Apostle Paul will say that Jesus is the image of God. Okay? So human beings are made in the image of God, and Paul will say later that Jesus is the image of God. And where do we see that Jesus is the image of God? You'll see that in one of the hymns, Galatians, from what I can remember, where he speaks that Jesus crucified on the cross was that they realized that he is the image of cross, the image of God. He is. So him crucified on the cross. So when people were seeing Jesus in Judea and just meet him and they say, okay, he's 6 tall, crook nose or whatever, 5'2" or whatever, crook nose, brown hair, bearded guy. So they wouldn't say, oh, this is the image of God. No one would recognize Jesus as the image of God when he was in Galilee, Judea, doing whatever he was doing.
That was his
man. But when he was crucified on the cross, when you read the scriptures, the earth was quaking and the sun was dark and so on. You see that he is the image of God, him crucified on the cross. So crucified on the cross and Jesus, they realize he is the image of God. Here, male and female were made in the image of God. So the cross has to do something with the image of God. When do we recognize, most of us who are married, how are we crucified and where do we find this image? in marriage. In marriage, we're crucified to each other, for each other, and that's where we are discovering our true image, that we're truly in the image of God.
Yeah.
That's why marriage is the sacrament. One of the reasons why marriage is the sacrament and the mystery of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are being crucified to each other and for each other. And that's where this mystery of the image of God is being revealed in us. When someone is domestic, that's usually a
That's the
crucified.
abundance of a life. Without that, there's no life. We die out. There's no human beings after that. If we don't get married and have children, we're dead.
Oh, that's all right. We're gonna die anyway, so.
But we need to be married to create life. Like, there would be no one to worship God
That's
if there was no marriage.
That's a very Roman Catholic understanding. In the Roman Catholic Church, you have a precondition that if you can't have children, you're not allowed to marry. That's one of the things. If you're proven that you can't have kids, that's one of the obstacles that you can't get married. Because the purpose of marriage in the Roman Catholic teaching is to have children. Children are the purpose of marriage. The reason why you get married is to get kids, to have kids. In your
Well, that's why everyone in the Serbian church, even the priests, marry and have children. Yeah.
That's not why. That's not why. Kids and children are the fruit of the marriage that can come and they don't have to come. Right? That's not the very purpose of marriage. That's a consequence of marriage. But the very purpose of marriage is what I just told you. Be crucified for each other and to put the needs of others before your very own needs. But that's the
thing to do.
And Christian life, by the way, it's not just, you will hear this from many fathers, many contemporary spiritual fathers, priests, that you either get married or you go to a monastery. Like, you either become a monastic or you get married. Nowhere in the teaching of the church is that. The purpose of Christian life is to draw closer to Christ in whatever way. So don't feel
Orthodox.
Don't feel pressure.
But that's Orthodox. Not every church. Like, do you know how many churches there are now? They got gay people. They got all sorts of things now. Not the purpose of every church now. I mean, there's a battle between the churches now, right?
Yeah, that was always the case, but we are not.
Even I saw a video of I don't want to turn the subject too much, but when the Pope was having his funeral, there was all these people with big robes and big hoods and all that sort of thing. It looked a little bit. Some people got freaked out,
Well, like someone who comes to the Orthodox Church, they freak out when they see me or they see a bishop. So, it's this cultural context. If some people are not used on icons or vestments or clothing, like I am dressed very strangely, people freak out for various things because they're, it's just something they're not used to.
Yeah.
Especially the bishop with the crown and all staff and snakes on the staff and this.
The staff.
It's all very scary for some people. So we need to break out of our own shell and try to understand other people rather than judging them.
Yeah. I admit I fell to it. I saw the video and I'm like, oh no, it's bad. They got the glowing lights and the big hoods.
That's the same thing. Well, they think the same thing for us when they see us.
Well, I think I've never condemned Catholicism. I think I believe a lot of people believe in Jesus through Catholicism as well. I don't have any bias between anyone who believes in Jesus, but it's hard to navigate sometimes, because it's not only this; there's stuff that it goes there's aliens, and Jesus is in. And one guy said to me, and I tried to, I admit, I tried to put him on the spot, and I said, "Oh, what do you think? Like Jesus is, God is, God of all the planets and everything, and all the aliens." And he said, "Yeah," and I thought, "Yeah, well, probably is." Of course he is. He's in charge of everything. But are there aliens out there? That doesn't answer the question. But it kind of put me on the spot, you know what I mean? Because God is God of everything. So,
Well, if there are some other intellectual beings outside there, they are humans and they're to be baptized. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's something,
Absolutely.
obviously, we, we don't know, but
Try to think how we thought about, in the 19th century, not just in the 19th century, like in Australia up until the 70s.
yeah.
We didn't consider Aboriginals to be humans. What our concept of human beings is, it doesn't necessarily have to align with God's concept with what human being is. So we shouldn't limit ourselves to our own concepts and precepts in culture, in theology. Probably what we're saying now will be very stupid for someone listening this in 20 years' time or 30 years' time or so. What concept are we talking about? So we really have to be very careful.
But it's a hard,
not
it's a hard thing. Listen, I went through that time with my dad. I looked after him for all that time, and I got in touch with our culture. I was growing up here in Australia, right? And I'm Aussie, right? But when I got in touch with their culture and and it was, there's one point where we're watching TV and the Jesus thing came up, and it was like in Serbia and everything. And I said, Tata, hoćeš da gledaš ovo? Misli, gleda, hoću, ajde da gledamo. I mean, that gave me like a lift in the spirit because I've been mixed up in a lot of different things, you know what I mean? Ono vreme mene je bilo sjajno, baš sjajno. That was a golden moment for me with my dad. And I didn't see that side of him, you know what I mean? Even though when we were young, he used to like have the prayer book out, and when we were young, we'd do the prayer book and all that sort of thing. And polako to je sve otišlo, znaš, all that stuff sort of fade away a little bit, but mi smo odrasli u crkvu. We were raised in the church, u folklornom grupu, mi smo not refugees.
Željko, I have to interrupt you. We got to go back to our topic here, and and can we also just stick to the subject here? Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So we're talking about the resurrection of Christ and how it is the very epicenter of our faith. And I try to explain also because there is no resurrection without the cross. And I just made a few references why the cross is so important. I've also very early returned to the meaning of cross, that there is something very, very deep in understanding the cross. And the fathers will say later, there is no resurrection without the cross. So the cross as a historical object is a torturing device that was invented by the Romans. Can we just?
It's not a mythical thing. It's not he wasn't.
All right,
I'll have to. The cross. It was an actual cross, right? Yeah.
Just a second. Please allow me to finish. So I'll have to mute everyone for a second, okay? And that's it. All right. So for the cross was a torturing device for Romans, and they invented the cross specifically as an authorized sort of a government sort of invention, where they would punish all those who were against the Roman government. Right? So the cross was sort of, and I always say that, and I'm sorry for you, you've heard this so many times, it's like an electrical chair to that. So the worst criminals were condemned to be crucified on the cross. Why am I saying this? Because when you read the antique writings of the first century before Christ, after Christ, when crucifixion was a legitimate way of punishing those who were against the Roman government, you will always see Cicero, for example, even trying to avoid to use the word cross. You'll see even Christians, they just have a cross, and in the Orthodox Church, that's still sometimes the case. where you wouldn't have a representation of Jesus, actually, of just the cross itself. So it was a scary, scary. People did not want to be around the cross. They were running away from the cross. They didn't want to be next to it. They wouldn't think about it. They didn't want to mention that. But the cross was horrible. No, no, no. So when Apostle Paul goes and preaches to the first century people in the Roman Empire, and when he says, I boast in nothing else but the cross of Christ, they would think, this guy's like, I boast in the election. Like, this is what I'm boasting in. Like, this is my pride. I'm really proud and full of pride of selected team. Like, and if a first century person would come into our church and would see the cross in the center of our church, or on top of our building, or wherever, we just put up a cross there in Carlin Monastery, that's it. Great. You're absolutely crazy. I'm running away from here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be around. That's no. Okay. Sorry? That's right. They used that this is a torturing device, running away from that. As I said, they wouldn't even mention the cross. They would be around the cross. That's why apostles, everyone, all the followers of Jesus, when he was crucified on the cross, all of them just ran away from him. They ran away because they thought, not just they were afraid of the cross, they thought they're going to be crucified as well because they were with him. They're his followers. They're accused. They're going to be accused of the same treason that Jesus was accused. Because Jesus was accused that he's the king. Also, I told you that's one of the last time, if you weren't here, that the title king is the only title that Roman emperors never used. Because the kings were sort of those dictators in Rome, tyrants. So kings were tyrants in Rome. So they would use the title imperator, which is emperor. But they would never use the title king. That's why when the accusation of Jesus is put above his head, the king of the Jews, then that's why that's his accusation. So he wanted to be the emperor. He's this tyrant. He's this tyrant. And he's fighting against the Roman Empire. He's fighting against the government, against the state. That's why he has to be crucified according to the Roman law. That's what it is. So, but the apostles have returned to the cross very soon after his resurrection. They've realized there is no resurrection without the cross. As we've seen, John will come to the same thing. John's gospel, and Jade could remind me of this, that the last words of Jesus are, it is finished. It is finished. What is finished? You see in the book of Genesis that for everything that God creates, God speaks that out. Let it be, let it be, let it be light, let it be light, let it be planets, stars, plants, animals, let it be, let it be, let it be. For human beings, he does not say let it be. He says, let us create. Okay? This is important. It's a project in the making. And now, finally, in the last gospel, so the whole Bible is about creating a human being. The whole thing. So it starts from the first page of the book of Genesis, and it ends in the last gospel, the last words of Jesus. It is finished. What's it? Human being. Human being is fully finished only when it's crucified on the cross. Martyrs, that's why martyrs, because we're all going to, what does this mean? We're all going to die. Sooner or later. That's the reality. What they did, why are the martyrs the highest of all in, like you have these orders of saints, Orthodox Church. You have martyrs, you have holy fathers, you have venerables, you have um, um, ranks of saints, different sort of ways someone was serving God. Prophets, evangelists, all of these people are holy, but there is a specific way they serve God. Someone as an evangelist, someone as a prophet, someone as a venerable, someone as a martyr. Martyrs hold the first spot. When you need to consecrate the altar of church, when you erect the altar table, you need to put a relic in that altar table. But you cannot put a relic of any other rank of saint but the martyr. It is so striking when an Orthodox priest comes to the altar table and kisses the altar table, and I kiss the relic or the remaining of someone who gave his life to Christ. It means my words, my problems, are nothing. This guy gave his life to Christ. Okay? And for us, this means a Christian is always prepared to give his life to Christ. That's what it should be. Because I'm going to die anyway. I better take my life with my own hands. Okay? Because if I give my life for Christ, I'm going to live forever. So I'm prepared to do something like that. Okay? So even now you have Coptic Orthodox Christians. I think there was 19 of them 6-7 years ago, and they were executed there, confessing that they believe in Christ. But there was 20 because one of the Al Qaeda, it's not Al Qaeda, but ISIS members was executed. He says they decapitated him on the spot, and he's considered sane at the same time. Like, this is like one of those stories from the early centuries when the persecutors became, sort of saw what Christians are, how Christians are prepared to give their life for Christ. And one of the executors says, I'm a Christian. And we say that this person is baptized in his blood. Even though he wasn't formally baptized, we say he's baptized in his blood. He's considered the same. So we have this martyrdom as the highest sort of ranks of sainthood because they were prepared to give their life to Christ. And the fathers of the church, Christians, were so passionate about that some were rushing to be martyrs. And the fathers of the church said, no, you cannot ask for martyrs. You can't be a fool. So you need to be witness of Christ in whatever you do, but only if it comes to that point where you need to give your life, then don't be afraid. Okay? So, but martyrs means I'm giving my life. I'm sacrificing myself. But there is so many ways you can sacrifice yourself for Christ or the other person. Right? So, and when you're prepared to do that, then the words of Jesus make sense. Whosoever wants to save his life, which means if my life is the highest value, and I'm going to sacrifice all of your lives in order to save mine, Jesus says, benefits. And whosoever loses his life will save. So if I'm prepared to lose my life, then I'm going to save my life. You see the paradox? So yes, I'm going to die, like all the martyrs. We're going to celebrate St. George the Martyr on the 6th of May now. He's a martyr from the end of the 3rd century, beginning of the 2nd. We still celebrate him, like he died. Okay? He's no more physically. But because he gave his life to Christ, even after 1800 years, we still celebrate. He's alive. That's what we believe that's going to happen to each and every one of us if we're prepared to sacrifice ourselves for Christ. So it doesn't mean that we're asking for persecution. We're going now into chapter 18. We're going to see that Paul is heading to Rome. I told you this last time. Paul's goal was to go to Rome to convert the emperor. So this notion of Protestants, that for some reason Christianity was distorted and spoiled because the Roman Empire became Christian, is just it's a nonsense. Paul was going to Rome convert the emperor. He's going to say that in one of the epistles later. And at that time, if I'm not wrong, the Roman emperor was Caligula. So he's one of the worst ones that ever existed in the world. So you have, and Paul saying, and I'm saying this from Timothy's epistle, and we have that in our prayer before Holy Communion. I believe, O Lord, that I confess you are truly the Son of the living God, who came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the first. Those are the words of Paul. He says, I am the worst of sinners. In times of Caligula, Paul says this. All right. He doesn't say, oh, this Caligula. This is our favorite sport, to accuse others that others are some sinners and we are saints. No, we're going to follow Paul, and we are going to follow Christians who are truly Christians, who consider themselves worse sinners. Really.
Like, that's one question. Say it's going to the big. Is that why when it's supposed to this is wrong?
Yes, wrong. Absolutely.
But that's,
And you have this in a Christian vision, in a Christian tradition, that Mary Magdalene finally reached the Roman emperor and gave him a red egg. Okay? Well, an egg. And he says, if this egg turns to be red, then I'm going to believe that Christ is risen. You have this in a sort of a faith, in a tale, in a tradition of the church, because what's the point of the gospel? That the whole world becomes Christian. And what's the easiest way? Go straight to the Roman emperor. All right, that's what you need to go. You need to go to the emperor, and then, so when Constantine legalizes Christianity, when later on emperors become Christian, this is the goal of the gospel. So that the word of Christ, that the word of resurrection of Christ spreads everywhere. That's our goal, that everyone becomes Christian. Everyone converts to Christ and believes in Christ. So this is really, really cute. So chapter 18 of the book of Acts. Sorry, this was a huge introduction. So we're following Paul. After these things, chapter 18, after these things, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth. And he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently came from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to depart from Rome. And he came to them, so because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked. For by occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and persuaded both Jews and Greeks. So we see here, actually, this is in chapter 19, where we see, just a second, so just to interpret this, we see this Aquila and Priscilla is mentioned here, and they're tent makers. And we know that Paul, and that's why I'm always emphasizing this, handiworks, how important it is to do things with hands, to make things. Like, we built this cross, and I say this, and if you keep yourself really busy and occupied, do something with your hands, at all times, if you can. So Paul was making tents. He wasn't asking for any money wherever he was going, to any sort of synagogues, any sort of meetings, even though he will say that he's entitled to do that. But he says, no, I have never asked anything. I've made everything with my hands. And this was a good business. And in the same business was Aquila and Priscilla. And because everyone needed tents at that time. The Roman army was huge. Whoever was traveling, they didn't have planes, they didn't have these fast travel devices or sort of trains or cars. So everyone had to have a tent in their backpack. So they would travel for a day, night comes, have to put up a tent, sleep there, and that's it. So it was a good business that Paul was in. And these people are the same. Okay. So when Silas and Timothy had come from Macedonia, Paul was compelled by the Spirit and testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Christ. So this is the main message of Paul, as we said. that Jesus is Christ, means Jesus is the Messiah. He goes first, as we said so many times before, he first goes to synagogues with Jews because they would know what the meaning of the word Messiah is. He's the one that is expected. He's now here. All right. But when they opposed him and blasphemed, he shook his garments and said to them, "Your blood be upon your own heads. I'm clean. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." So this is now a shift in Paul's, we'll see now a shift in Paul's missionary activity. He will now not, in the chapter before, we've seen him going to Athens. We've seen him actually speaking to straight forward pagans. So he's not just talking to Jews. He's now talking to everyone. And now this is a visible, this sort of wording where he says, "No, I'm going to pagans, Gentiles, being all the nations." And he departed from there and entered the house of a certain man named Justus, one who worshipped God, whose house was next door to the synagogue. And then Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his household. Okay, also, just stop here. Crispus believed on the Lord with all his household. This is one of the proofs that when someone was baptized, children were baptized as well. When he says all the household, that means even children, even infants, everyone. Believe means being faithful. Everyone is now in the faith, and everyone is now Christian. It's not just me and let them decide. I tell everyone, people sometimes come to me and say, "Well, maybe I won't be baptizing my children. I want to leave them to make this decision when they're adults and so on." And my usual question is, do you leave them make a choice what language are they going to talk? What language are they going to speak? Like if they're in your household, they grow up in this atmosphere where certain values are, or like language, are imprinted into it. And that's what it is. But they grow up, especially in the Orthodox Church, and the infant, when it's baptized, they receive the same sacrament of confirmation straight away. So it's not just a rational part of you that participates in the mystery of God. God is a mystery. You can't limit God only to rational part. That's why the worship of the Orthodox Church is a mystical worship. It means you can feel it. We have the icons, we have singing, we have kissing the icons, we have all of our senses, we have instant. So our sense of smell is engaged, our eyes are engaged, our ears are engaging. So everything is engaged. It means our whole being is engaged. Which means if your infant is there, your child is there, that child grows up and is being raised in this mystery. And sense of smell, you know that. Sometimes when you feel some smell, it will remind you on some event that happened at that specific time. So it's very good that you bring your children to the church, that they grow up with you in the church. And this is not an later invention of the church. The whole household of this guy who believed in the Lord was in the church. It's everyone, okay? And many of the Corinthians, hearing, believed and were baptized. Now the Lord spoke to Paul in the night by a vision. "Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not keep silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to hurt you, for I have many people in this city." And he continued there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. He's in Corinth. We'll see why this is important to be mentioned, because later on in the epistles of Corinthians, there's not going to be one epistle or one letter to Corinthians. There's going to be 2 letters to Corinthians of Paul, because there's going to be so many issues and problems in this church of Corinth that biblicists or biblical archaeologists or people who study Bible will tell you, and that's probably right, that there were actually 4 letters to Corinthians, which were then sort of brought together and made 2. But Paul was constantly going back to these guys that he baptized, and he's going to say, "You know me," okay? I was there, I baptized you. Please stop doing X, Y, and Z, and so on and so on. Because there's going to be so many paganism and pagan customs and so on in the Church of Corinth. And when you read the Epistle of Corinthians, and hopefully we'll get there as well to see what was happening there. Okay. So then, verse 12, when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews with one accord rose up against Paul and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, "This fellow persuades men to worship God contrary to the law." So this is a usual accusation of the Jews, that, you know, their law is being sort of broken and that's contrary to their law. Okay? And when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or wicked crimes, O Jews, there would be a reason why I should bear with you. But if it is a question of words and names and your own law, look it to yourselves, for I do not want to be a judge of such matters." And he drove them from the judgment seat. Then all the Greeks took Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him before the judgment seat. But Gallio took no notice of these things. All right. So, as I said to you before, someone who is a Roman citizen has no rights at all. So these Jews, most of them are not Roman citizens. I told you, even in Australia, I have a sister-in-law. She's not an Australian citizen. You have to sort of wait and go through a certain process in order to, if you're a migrant coming here, you have to sort of earn your citizenship. You have to be, if you're a skilled migrant, you know, Australia will import you here to do a certain skill and so on. And you sort of earn your citizenship, or you're born here. In Rome, you had to earn even more your Roman citizenship. You have to be probably in an army. And then if you survive an army, you would be awarded by, you know, Roman government would give you a portion of land, and they would grant you citizenship, and they would probably give you a portion of land somewhere on the outskirts of the Roman Empire, so they could spread their culture, their civilization, and so on. So but there were, most of the people in Roman Empire were not Roman citizens. They were just either slaves or non-Roman citizens, and they had no right in front of the Roman law. So we all, even now, Australia is Rome, so far, but Australian legal system is based on the Roman legal system, and all the laws and structure and so on, all of it is based on the Roman legal system. It was a perfect one, but no one who wasn't a Roman citizen didn't have any rights. So they were treated as cats, as pests. So that's why when Gallio, he says that he took no notice of these things. So the leader of the Jewish synagogue, Jews, took Paul, brought him to the Roman proconsul, and accused Paul of doing X, Y, and Z. And he said, "This is your religious matter. I don't care. Right? I couldn't care less. You know, you deal with this." And so the Jews then turned to Sosthenes, who was Jewish leader of the synagogue, and they did whatever. They beat him before his own eyes. Now, if he was a Roman citizen, he would have to defend him and so on, but he took no notice because he could. So, you know, I told you before that if you're not a Roman citizen, you'll be put in jail and just left there to rot, die very slow and painful death. So that's it. But Paul, on the other hand, he was a Roman citizen. Okay, there is a catch. So we read further on. So Paul still remained a good while. So he took advantage of this. He still remained there a good while. Okay. Then he took leave of the brethren and sailed for Syria. And Priscilla and Aquila were with him. You see here, Priscilla and Aquila. It's not anymore Aquila and Priscilla, right? Priscilla is a female. Aquila is a man, a husband, wife, and husband. See here, a wife is first mentioned, then the husband. All right. One of the reasons why so many women, I told you before, according to Aristotle, women had no right to education. Women had no right to go to Plato's Academy, or they wouldn't even consider fully pure, because according to Aristotle, it was when a female was born, it was just they weren't developed properly. That was what how we all magnify Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and so on, all these major Greek philosophers. But when it comes to their view on women, they were treated like cattle, pretty much like ownership. So a wife was an ownership of a husband. So a husband could do anything to a wife. Christians are changing their view totally on women. Right? You see this in the New Testament everywhere. That's why so many women are coming and so many slaves are coming, because they're treated equally. So Paul will say there is no male or female, Jew or Greek, free man or slave. We're all one in Christ Jesus. Okay? So they're all treated equally. Probably one of the reasons why Priscilla is here mentioned, maybe that she was wealthy, from a wealthy family, and she was very rich. That also might be the case. Or simply because she played a major role in the family. But just as a sort of a note, a longer note, sorry. Okay. So he went there, Priscilla and Aquila were with him. He had his hair cut off at Canchrea, however this is pronounced. For he had taken a vow. Now, we had this Nazarenes were a Jewish sort of a sect, but they were part of Judaism, and they would cut their hair as a vow to God not to get married, become a vow of virginity, a vow of innocence, a vow of total dedication to God. And that's why they would cut their hair totally and maintain it totally bald. So always cut their hair and be bald. So you can see Paul to be bald on frescoes as well. You can see that monastics in the Orthodox Church do the same thing. You go there and see Saint Sava, you would see that they would sort of shave this part of their head. In the Western Church, they would shave this front part of their head. In the Eastern Church, they would shave this back part. And even now in the Orthodox Church, when someone is tonsured or a reader, the bishop would cut the hair, right, from their head. Some even argue when on baptism, he tonsures someone, that's also a vow of total dedication to God. But this was something that would be cut. The hair would be off permanent, so it would be sort of you just cut it once and then that's it. Now, no, actually, no, not anymore. But as I said, even in the 13th century, Saint Sava, we had his portrait actually done in one of the monasteries in Milesheva, whilst he was still alive, and we had reproduction of that in our church, right on the east side with Saint Sava and Saint Simina. You can see actually that he didn't have this part here, so, and he had a short hair. No, they would actually cut, they would shave, and they would keep that part shaved. In accordance with Paul, because Paul wasn't married, he gave his vows. Here we have that, and that wasn't the new thing. Nazarenes as Jews, they had these vows as well. Okay, so what Paul wants to do here, he wants to prove to his fellow Jews that he's not just any Jew, that he took his vows. That meaning that he accepted the Messiah, but he did not abandon his Judaism. I told you before that he made Timothy circumcised because Timothy was a Jew. He's not forcing others who come from paganism. He's not forcing them to be circumcised. But if you're a Jew, you follow your tradition. You are circumcised because the main message for Paul was that Christ is risen. He's the Messiah. That's the main message. He's the Lord. He's the Kyrios. And everything else, he doesn't want to waste time on anything like that. Like, this is not a major thing for Paul, right? This is sort of a cultural thing because he wants to take the argument from his fellow Jews who are going to accuse him that he's no Jew at all. But he wants to prove that he is the real Jew that even took the vow of Nazarene, okay, and made Timothy to be circumcised. All right? Because he's going to have many more arguments proving that Jesus is the Messiah. And he wants to spend time and focus on that. He doesn't want to focus on peripheral things that are not important. Okay? That's why he's doing this. Okay? And he came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they asked him to stay a longer time with them, he did not consent, but took leave of them, saying, I must by all means keep this coming feast in Jerusalem, but I will return again to you, God willing. And he sailed from Ephesus. In Ephesus? Okay. And when he had landed at Caesarea and gone up and greeted the church, he went down to Antioch. Now, this is not the same, I think it's not the same Antioch. After he had spent some time there, he departed and went over to the region of Galatia and Phrygia in order, strengthening all the disciples. So we can see that he's going wherever he was before to strengthen them in faithfulness to Christ. Now, a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit, he spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, though he knew only the baptism of John. Okay. I've told you this before. I just want to repeat this. John was even more known in the Jewish communities across the world than Jesus. But John was so influential that everyone heard about John the Baptist. All right? So this Apollos, who is, as we heard here in a couple of verses, fervent in spirit, spoke and taught accurately the things of the Lord, but he knew only of the baptism of John. Okay? Why are we talking about this? Because Jews were reading the scriptures, knew that the Messiah is about to come. They were expecting the Messiah. They read the prophecies of Daniel and all the other prophecies, and they knew that this is about this time that the Messiah is about to appear. Okay? Let's continue. So he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Aquila and Priscilla, okay, now we have Aquila and Priscilla, not Priscilla. Okay. So when Aquila and Priscilla heard him, they took him aside and explained to him the way of God more accurate. And when he desired to cross to Achaia, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him. And when he arrived, he greatly helped those who had believed through grace. For he vigorously refuted the Jews publicly, showing from the scriptures that Jesus is the Christ, that Jesus is the Messiah. So we see again once more. We'll stop here because I think we had, it's 9 o'clock already, so we spent 1 hour. We see that people who are intelligent, people who are fervent, people who are passionate, they're going to Christ. They're going to Jesus. They're following him. They even understand that what John was teaching, that John was actually saying, and we've heard this last time as well when Paul was in Thessaloniki. He's talking about John because they've already heard about John. John was famous, more famous than Jesus at that time. And they're trying to explain, well, you know what? John is just a forerunner. He himself said for Jesus, this is the one who was before me. But who's coming after me and whose shoes I'm not worthy to untie? Shoe laces. All right. Yeah. Any questions? Any comments? Sorry, I'm just going to try to. Sorry. Any comments? Any questions? Anyone wants to?
No, that was good. Thank you.
All right.
My first time here, so I don't have much to say. I'm just listening and taking it all in. It was very informative. You go into different places where I've never thought of, inside the scriptures. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. We're welcome. Come again.
Yeah. I will for sure.
All right. Well, we're going to end then the Zoom. If no one has any sort of questions or
No, thank you.
presentations. All right.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
Father. Thank
Good
you.
Next
night.
time I have to
Yeah.
correct it.
Thank
Thank you. Bye.